The morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine marble floors of Kensington Palace as Captain Marcus Wellington adjusted his ceremonial sword for the third time in 5 minutes. 28 years old and, carved from discipline, Marcus had spent the last decade climbing the ranks of the Royal Guard, earning his position through unwavering dedication and an almost supernatural ability to anticipate danger before it materialized. His steel-gray eyes, inherited from his military father, never missed a detail, and his presence commanded respect from both subordinates and superiors alike. Today felt different, though Marcus couldn't pinpoint exactly why. Perhaps it was the unusual flutter of activity among the palace staff, or maybe it was the way Princess Charlotte had seemed distracted during yesterday's security briefing. At 19, the princess possessed a warmth that endeared her to the public and a sharp intelligence that sometimes put seasoned diplomats to shame. Yet lately, Marcus had noticed a pallor to her complexion and a tremor in her hands that she thought no one observed. The East Wing buzzed with preparation for the annual Children's Charity Gala, an event close to Princess Charlotte's heart. She had personally overseen every detail, from the handwritten invitations to the selection of entertainment that would delight the young guests. The gala represented everything she hoped to accomplish as a working royal, bringing joy to those who needed it most while fulfilling her duties to the crown. Marcus positioned himself at his usual post outside the princess's private chambers, his trained ears attuned to every sound within. Through the heavy oak doors, he could hear Charlotte's lady-in-waiting, Mrs. Pemberton, discussing the day's schedule in her crisp Yorkshire accent. The conversation seemed normal enough, timing for hair and makeup, final adjustments to her powder blue gown, and reminders about the various dignitaries who would be in attendance. What Marcus didn't hear was the princess's response, which should have been her characteristic laugh or at least some acknowledgement of Mrs. Pemberton's detailed planning. Instead, an unsettling silence stretched beyond the doors, broken only by the distant sound of heels clicking across marble as staff members hurried about their duties. The captain's hand instinctively moved toward his radio when he heard Mrs. Pemberton's voice again, higher this time, tinged with concern. "Your Royal Highness? Princess Charlotte, are you quite all right?" The question hung in the air like morning mist, and Marcus felt his pulse quicken despite years of training that had taught him to remain calm under pressure. Inside her chambers, Princess Charlotte stood frozen before her full-length mirror, watching her reflection waver like a mirage. The young woman staring back at her appeared translucent, as if she were slowly fading from existence. Her breathing became shallow and rapid, each inhale feeling insufficient, as if the very air had thinned around her. The familiar surroundings of her room, the antique writing desk where she penned personal letters, the collection of first-edition novels that provided escape from royal duties, the photographs of family vacations to Scotland, all seemed to tilt and shift like pieces of a puzzle being shaken in its box. Mrs. Pemberton, a woman of 63 who had served 3 generations of the royal family, recognized the signs immediately. She had witnessed similar episodes before, though never quite like this. The princess's face had drained of all color, leaving her looking like a porcelain doll, beautiful but lifeless. Her usually bright green eyes had become glassy and unfocused, staring at something far beyond the confines of the room. "Charlotte, dear, please sit down," Mrs. Pemberton urged, abandoning protocol in her concern. She reached for the princess's elbow, intending to guide her to the nearby chaise lounge, but Charlotte's body had gone rigid, unresponsive to gentle guidance. It was as if invisible threads held her suspended in place, trapped between consciousness and something far more frightening. Marcus heard the urgency in Mrs. Pemberton's voice escalate, followed by the unmistakable sound of something heavy hitting the floor. Without hesitation, he abandoned his post and burst through the doors that separated him from his primary responsibility, protecting Princess Charlotte at all costs. The sight that greeted him would haunt his dreams for years to come. The princess lay crumpled on the Persian rug, her powder blue dress spread around her like spilled water. Her face, which had graced countless magazine covers and charmed world leaders, was now ashen and still. Mrs. Pemberton knelt beside her, her withered hands trembling as she checked for signs of life, her usual composure completely shattered. "Call the physician immediately," Marcus commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos with military precision. He dropped to his knees beside Charlotte, his training taking over even as his heart hammered against his ribs. Her pulse was weak but present, her breathing shallow but steady. Still, seeing her like this, vulnerable and unconscious, struck him with a force he hadn't anticipated. The princess had always been more than just another assignment to Marcus. Over the years, he had watched her grow from a spirited teenager into a compassionate young woman who genuinely cared about her role and responsibilities. She remembered the names of staff members' children, asked about their health concerns, and never treated anyone as invisible despite her elevated position. These small acts of kindness had earned his deep respect, though he had never allowed himself to acknowledge that his feelings had evolved beyond professional duty. Now, as he cradled her head to prevent further injury, Marcus felt something crack inside his chest, not his ribs, but something deeper, more fundamental to who he believed himself to be. The carefully constructed walls between personal feelings and professional obligations began to crumble like ancient mortar. Mrs. Pemberton's hands shook as she dialed the royal physician's direct line, her voice barely steady enough to convey the urgency of the situation. Within minutes, the quiet sanctity of the East Wing had transformed into a battlefield of worry and whispered conversations. Staff members appeared at doorways, their faces etched with concern for the young woman who had brought such light to the often somber corridors of the palace. Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell arrived within 10 minutes, her medical bag in one hand and a portable cardiac monitor in the other. A woman of 55 with silver-streaked hair and intelligent brown eyes, she had served as the royal family's physician for over a decade and had earned their complete trust through her discretion and expertise. However, as she knelt beside Charlotte's still form, her usual confident demeanor wavered slightly. "How long has she been unconscious?" Dr. Hartwell asked, her fingers already checking Charlotte's pulse while her eyes assessed the princess's color and breathing pattern. "Approximately 12 minutes, Marcus replied, his military training allowing him to provide precise details even while his emotions churned like a storm-tossed sea. Mrs. Pemberton heard her fall, and I arrived within 30 seconds. The doctor's examination revealed several concerning symptoms: an irregular heartbeat, slightly dilated pupils, and skin that felt unusually cool to the touch despite the warm temperature of the room. More troubling was the way Charlotte's body seemed unresponsive to typical revival techniques, as if she had retreated somewhere beyond the reach of conventional medical intervention. "We need to move her to the medical wing immediately, Dr. Hartwell declared, already reaching for her phone to alert the palace's medical team. "This isn't a simple fainting spell. Something more serious is happening here." As palace staff prepared to transport Charlotte, Marcus made a decision that would alter the trajectory of his career and his life. Instead of maintaining his usual professional distance, he scooped the unconscious princess into his arms, feeling the fragility of her form against his chest. The action was both protective and deeply personal, crossing boundaries that had been clearly established in his training. The journey through the palace corridors felt endless, despite taking less than 5 minutes. Other members of the royal family had been quietly notified, and Marcus could see the worry etched into every face they passed. The Queen herself appeared at the entrance to the medical wing, her usual regal composure intact but her eyes reflecting a grandmother's deep concern for her beloved granddaughter. As they reached the medical facility, Charlotte's eyelids fluttered briefly, and, for a moment, Marcus thought she might regain consciousness. Instead, a single tear escaped from her closed eye, trailing down her pale cheek like liquid silver. The sight of that tear, so small yet so profound, shattered the last of Marcus's professional reserve. In that moment, surrounded by the clinical efficiency of the medical wing and the barely contained panic of the royal household, Captain Marcus Wellington realized that he would break every protocol, defy every regulation, and risk his entire career if it meant ensuring Princess Charlotte's safety and recovery. The young woman in his arms had become far more than his charge; she had become the most important person in his world, and he was prepared to protect her with everything he had, consequences be damned. The palace medical wing hummed with controlled urgency as Dr. Hartwell worked to stabilize Princess Charlotte. Advanced monitoring equipment, discreetly hidden behind traditional wood paneling to maintain the palace's historic aesthetic, now displayed a symphony of concerning vital signs. Charlotte's heart rate fluctuated wildly between dangerous extremes, while her blood pressure readings defied conventional medical expectations. Most troubling of all, standard revival techniques continued to prove ineffective against whatever had claimed the princess's consciousness. Marcus had been ordered to wait in the corridor, but he refused to move beyond the doorway where he could maintain visual contact with Charlotte. His breach of protocol didn't go unnoticed by Commander Harrison, head of palace security and Marcus's direct superior. The older man, weathered by 30 years of service to the crown, approached with measured steps that echoed his military background. Captain Wellington, Commander Harrison's voice carried the weight of authority earned through decades of unwavering loyalty to the royal family. Your behavior today has been noted. Step away from the medical bay and report to my office immediately. Marcus turned to face his superior, his steel-gray eyes blazing with an intensity that made even the seasoned commander pause. With all due respect, sir, I'm not leaving this post until I know she's safe. The words came out more forcefully than Marcus had intended, but he felt no inclination to soften them. Years of rigid discipline and unquestioning obedience seemed insignificant compared to the unconscious young woman lying meters away. You're speaking of Her Royal Highness Princess Charlotte, Harrison corrected sharply. And your personal feelings, whatever they may be, have no bearing on your professional duties. You've already overstepped by carrying her here yourself. Don't compound your mistakes. The accusation struck Marcus like a physical blow, partly because it contained enough truth to sting. His feelings for Charlotte had indeed evolved far beyond the boundaries of professional duty, though he had never acted upon them or allowed them to interfere with his responsibilities. Until today, when the sight of her collapse had shattered every carefully constructed wall he had built around his emotions. My personal feelings ensure she receives the protection she deserves, Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the turmoil raging within him. I've spent 5 years learning her routines, understanding her vulnerabilities, anticipating threats before they materialize. No one else knows her security needs as intimately as I do. Dr. Hartwell emerged from the medical bay at that moment, her face grave with concern that extended beyond typical medical worry. As the royal family's physician, she had treated everything from minor injuries to serious health scares, but Charlotte's condition presented symptoms she had never encountered in over 2 decades of medical practice. Commander, Captain, she acknowledged both men with professional courtesy before addressing the more pressing matter. Princess Charlotte's condition is unprecedented. Her vital signs suggest she's experiencing something far more complex than a simple medical emergency. I need to contact specialists immediately. What kind of specialists? Marcus interjected, ignoring the sharp look from his commander. His protective instincts had completely overridden considerations of rank and protocol. What exactly is happening to her? Dr. Hartwell hesitated, her medical training warring with the need to maintain patient confidentiality, even within the secure environment of the palace. Her neurological responses are highly unusual. Brain activity patterns suggest she's conscious on some level, but not in any way our current understanding can explain. It's as if her mind has retreated to somewhere we can't reach through conventional means. The implications of the doctor's words settled over the group like a heavy shroud. Marcus felt his world tilting on its axis as he processed the possibility that Charlotte might be trapped somewhere beyond medical intervention. The young woman who had brought such warmth and vitality to the palace corridors might be fighting a battle that none of them could even comprehend, let alone assist with. Queen Elizabeth arrived in the medical wing accompanied by Prince William, both maintaining the composed dignity expected of the royal family while their eyes betrayed deep personal concern. The Queen's presence immediately elevated the gravity of the situation, transforming a medical emergency into a potential constitutional crisis if Charlotte's condition proved serious or prolonged. Dr. Hartwell, what is my granddaughter's status? The Queen's voice carried the authority of decades of leadership, but underneath lay the unmistakable tremor of a grandmother fearing for her grandchild's well-being. Your Majesty, Princess Charlotte is stable but unresponsive. Her condition doesn't match any standard diagnostic criteria. I've already contacted specialists in neurology and psychiatry, but I fear this may require expertise beyond conventional medicine. Dr. Hartwell's admission carried significant weight, given her reputation for finding solutions to complex medical challenges. Prince William moved closer to the medical bay's entrance, his face pale with worry for his daughter. As second in line to the throne, he understood the broader implications of Charlotte's condition, but, in this moment, he was simply a father desperate for his child's recovery. Has she shown any signs of consciousness? Any response to external stimuli? Minimal, sir. Occasional eye movement beneath closed lids, slight changes in breathing patterns when specific people speak near her. Interestingly, she seems most responsive to Captain Wellington's presence. Dr. Hartwell's observation caused all eyes to turn toward Marcus, who felt heat rise in his cheeks despite his typically unflappable demeanor. Commander Harrison's expression hardened further at this revelation. The suggestion that Charlotte responded uniquely to Marcus's presence implied a connection that ventured far beyond appropriate professional boundaries. Such connections could compromise security protocols and create vulnerabilities that enemies of the crown might exploit. Captain Wellington will be reassigned immediately, Harrison declared with finality. We cannot afford security compromises during a crisis of this magnitude. No. The word escaped Marcus's lips before he could consider the consequences of directly contradicting his superior in front of the royal family. If my presence provides any comfort or stability for her condition, removing me could worsen her situation. My personal feelings don't matter compared to her recovery. The Queen studied Marcus with the penetrating gaze that had evaluated world leaders and dignitaries for over 7 decades. She had witnessed countless examples of loyalty and devotion during her reign, but something in the young captain's demeanor suggested depths of commitment that transcended duty or ambition. Captain Wellington, she addressed him directly, her voice carrying both authority and unexpected gentleness. Your dedication to my granddaughter's safety has been exemplary. However, Dr. Hartwell's observation raises questions about the nature of your professional relationship. Marcus felt the weight of his career hanging in the balance, but his answer came without hesitation. Your Majesty, I would sacrifice everything I have to ensure Princess Charlotte's safety and recovery. If that compromises my position, so be it. But I won't abandon her when she needs protection most. His declaration hung in the air like a challenge to everything the Royal Guard represented. Professional distance, emotional detachment, and unwavering obedience to hierarchy formed the foundation of palace security. Marcus had just shattered all 3 principles with a few honest words, but he felt lighter somehow, as if speaking the truth had freed him from chains he hadn't realized were constraining him. Dr. Hartwell returned to Charlotte's bedside, adjusting monitoring equipment that continued displaying readings unlike anything in her medical experience. The princess's face, usually animated with intelligence and warmth, remained serene but empty, as if her spirit had temporarily departed while her body maintained basic functions. As the hours stretched into afternoon, Charlotte's condition neither improved nor deteriorated. She existed in a space between consciousness and unconsciousness, responding to nothing except occasional subtle reactions to Marcus's voice. Each time he spoke near her bedside, her breathing would shift slightly, or her fingers would move in barely perceptible ways that suggested some part of her awareness remained connected to the physical world. The children's charity gala had been quietly postponed, with palace officials citing a minor scheduling conflict rather than revealing the true reason for the delay. Media attention remained minimal, though rumors began circulating among London's social circles about unusual activity at Kensington Palace. The palace press office prepared carefully worded statements designed to deflect curiosity while maintaining plausible explanations for any observed irregularities. As evening approached, Marcus maintained his unauthorized vigil beside Charlotte's bed, speaking quietly about mundane topics, the weather, preparations for upcoming royal engagements, amusing incidents from his security rounds. Each conversation was one-sided, but he persisted, driven by the irrational hope that his voice might serve as an anchor to help her find her way back to consciousness. Commander Harrison had temporarily suspended his decision about Marcus's reassignment, recognizing that the unprecedented nature of Charlotte's condition required unconventional responses. However, the captain's career hung by an increasingly thin thread, sustained only by the possibility that his presence might somehow contribute to the princess's recovery. In the quiet hours before dawn, as palace staff moved through corridors with hushed urgency, Charlotte's eyelids began to flutter more frequently. Dr. Hartwell noticed the change immediately, her hopes rising as monitoring equipment registered subtle but significant improvements in brain activity patterns. Something was calling the princess back from wherever her consciousness had retreated, and all evidence suggested that Marcus's unwavering presence played a crucial role in her potential recovery. Dawn broke over Kensington Palace with an ethereal quality that seemed to mirror the fragile hope building within the medical wing. Charlotte's brain activity had shown marginal but consistent improvement throughout the night, correlating directly with periods when Marcus spoke near her bedside. Dr. Hartwell documented these patterns with scientific precision while grappling with the unprecedented nature of what she was witnessing. The specialist team had arrived during the early morning hours. Dr. James Morrison, a renowned neurologist from London's most prestigious medical institute, and Dr. Sarah Chen, a psychiatrist whose groundbreaking research into consciousness studies had earned international recognition. Both doctors brought decades of experience with complex cases, yet Charlotte's condition defied every diagnostic framework they attempted to apply. Her brain scans show activity patterns I've never encountered, Dr. Morrison confided to his colleague while reviewing the overnight monitoring data. There's significant neural activity in regions associated with deep emotional processing and memory formation, but virtually nothing in areas responsible for basic motor functions or sensory awareness. It's as if her consciousness has retreated to the most protected regions of her mind. Dr. Chen studied the correlation charts that Dr. Hartwell had meticulously maintained throughout the night. The improvements coinciding with Captain Wellington's presence are statistically significant. Whatever connection exists between them appears to be providing some form of neurological anchoring. I've read about similar phenomena in cases of severe psychological trauma, where familiar voices or presences can guide patients back to consciousness. Marcus had overheard enough of these conversations to understand that Charlotte's condition remained critically serious despite the small improvements. The knowledge that his presence might be helping her somehow both comforted and terrified him. The weight of responsibility felt crushing. What if he said the wrong thing? What if his exhaustion compromised his ability to serve as her lifeline back to consciousness? Prince William had spent most of the night in the corridor outside the medical wing, occasionally speaking with the medical team but primarily keeping silent vigil for his daughter. The strain was evident in his face, aging him beyond his years as he grappled with helplessness that no royal title could remedy. When he finally approached Marcus during a brief break in medical consultations, his words carried the weight of a father's desperation. "Captain, Dr. Hartwell tells me that Charlotte responds to your voice more than anyone else's. I need you to understand that nothing, not protocol, not hierarchy, not even my direct orders, matters more than my daughter's recovery. If staying by her side helps bring her back, then that's where you need to be." The prince's words carried obvious authorization for Marcus to continue his vigil, but they also implied a level of trust and responsibility that felt almost overwhelming. Marcus had trained his entire career to protect royalty from external threats, but this situation required something far more personal and vulnerable, opening his heart completely while maintaining the strength Charlotte needed to find her way home. As the morning progressed, Charlotte's vital signs continued showing gradual improvement. Her heart rate stabilized within normal ranges, her breathing became more natural and less labored, and, most encouraging of all, her brain activity patterns began showing more complexity and variation. Dr. Hartwell documented each small change with cautious optimism, knowing that recovery from such an unusual condition could be as unpredictable as its onset. Mrs. Pemberton had remained close throughout the ordeal, her maternal instincts toward Charlotte overriding any considerations of proper rest or protocol. The elderly lady-in-waiting had witnessed Charlotte grow from a spirited child into a compassionate young woman, and the possibility of losing her felt like contemplating the loss of her own daughter. When she noticed Marcus swaying slightly from exhaustion after maintaining his vigil for over 18 hours, she intervened with characteristic directness. "Captain Wellington, you're no good to her if you collapse from fatigue. Sit in this chair, rest your eyes for a few minutes, but keep talking to her. Your voice seems to be the lighthouse guiding her through whatever storm she's weathering." Mrs. Pemberton's practical wisdom carried the authority of someone who had navigated royal crises for decades. Marcus accepted the chair gratefully, positioning it close enough to Charlotte's bed that he could maintain physical proximity while resting his increasingly heavy limbs. His voice had grown hoarse from hours of one-sided conversation, but he continued speaking about anything that came to mind: childhood memories of growing up in rural Yorkshire, observations about the changing seasons visible through the medical wing's windows, plans for upcoming security protocols that seemed laughably mundane given current circumstances. During one of these rambling conversations, something extraordinary happened. Marcus was describing the way morning light transformed the palace gardens when Charlotte's hand moved, not the involuntary muscle twitches that had occurred throughout the night, but a deliberate, purposeful gesture that seemed to reach toward his voice. Dr. Hartwell noticed immediately, her attention snapping to focus on this first sign of voluntary motor response. Charlotte, Marcus whispered, leaning closer to her bedside. "Can you hear me? I'm here, and you're safe. Everyone who loves you is waiting for you to come back to us." His words carried all the emotion he had suppressed during years of professional duty, transforming from careful protocol into raw, honest communication from one human being to another. Charlotte's eyelids fluttered with increasing frequency, and her breathing pattern changed to suggest the transition between deep unconsciousness and lighter stages of sleep. The monitoring equipment registered these changes as significant neurological improvements, though Dr. Hartwell cautioned that full recovery remained uncertain. Queen Elizabeth returned to the medical wing during the afternoon, accompanied by other members of the royal family who had maintained anxious vigils throughout the crisis. The sight of her unconscious granddaughter, surrounded by medical equipment in the sterile environment of the palace's clinical facility, seemed to age the monarch visibly. Yet when she observed Marcus maintaining his constant presence beside Charlotte's bed, speaking to her with unwavering dedication despite obvious exhaustion, something in the Queen's expression softened. "Captain Wellington," she addressed him quietly, drawing him aside for a private conversation that would be remembered and discussed for years within palace circles. "Your devotion to my granddaughter's well-being has been extraordinary. Dr. Hartwell informs me that your presence may be instrumental in her recovery. I want you to know that regardless of what protocols you may have bent or boundaries you may have crossed, your actions today demonstrate the highest form of service to this family." The Queen's words carried implications that extended far beyond simple approval of his actions. She was acknowledging the obvious depth of his feelings for Charlotte while simultaneously granting permission for those feelings to guide his continued efforts toward her recovery. For a monarch who had spent decades navigating the complex intersection of personal emotions and public duty, this represented a remarkable departure from traditional royal expectations. As afternoon stretched into evening, Charlotte's movements became more frequent and purposeful. Her hand would seek Marcus's voice when he spoke, and her facial expressions began showing subtle changes that suggested increasing awareness of her surroundings. Dr. Chin documented these developments as significant progress while cautioning that the final stages of recovery from such unusual circumstances could be as complex as the initial crisis. The breakthrough came during sunset, when golden light streaming through the medical wing's windows created an almost mystical atmosphere around Charlotte's bed. Marcus was describing the view of London's skyline from the palace's highest tower when Charlotte's eyes suddenly opened, clear and focused, seeking his face with unmistakable recognition. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice barely audible but carrying all the warmth and intelligence that had been absent during her unconscious state. "You stayed with me. I could hear you calling me back." The simple acknowledgement struck Marcus with overwhelming force, confirming that his vigil had indeed served as the lifeline that guided her return to consciousness. Dr. Hartwell immediately began conducting cognitive assessments while Marcus struggled to maintain professional composure despite the emotional magnitude of Charlotte's recovery. But, even as relief flooded through everyone present, Charlotte's words suggested that her experience during unconsciousness had been far more complex than simple medical crisis. She spoke of feeling lost in darkness, of hearing Marcus's voice as the only anchor connecting her to the physical world, of fighting to return to a place where that voice could guide her home. The implications of her recovery, and the role that Marcus's unwavering dedication had played in achieving it, would reshape everything about their relationship and his position within the royal guard. Protocol had been shattered, boundaries had been crossed, and feelings that had long been suppressed had been revealed in the most public way possible. Yet as Charlotte's eyes met Marcus's in that golden afternoon light, none of those complications seemed to matter compared to the simple, profound relief of her return to consciousness. The young woman who had brought such light to the palace corridors was back, and the man who had risked everything to guide her home had proven that sometimes love was indeed the most powerful form of protection. 3 weeks had passed since Charlotte's mysterious collapse, and the palace had gradually returned to its normal rhythm of dignified efficiency. Yet beneath the surface of restored routine, fundamental changes had taken root that would reshape relationships and challenge centuries of royal tradition. Charlotte's recovery had been complete and remarkably swift once consciousness returned, but the circumstances surrounding her crisis had created ripple effects that continued to resonate throughout the royal household. Dr. Hartwell had conducted extensive follow-up examinations, finding no lingering physical effects from Charlotte's unusual medical episode. Brain scans showed normal activity patterns, blood work revealed perfect health markers, and cognitive assessments demonstrated that her intelligence and memory remained completely intact. The medical team's final report classified the incident as an unprecedented neurological event of unknown origin, a conclusion that satisfied official requirements while acknowledging the limitations of conventional medical understanding. However, Charlotte herself possessed memories of her unconscious period that defied medical explanation. She described experiencing a vast, empty space where time seemed suspended and familiar landmarks of consciousness had vanished entirely. In that void, Marcus's voice had appeared like a beacon, providing the only point of reference that allowed her to navigate back toward awareness. The connection she felt to his presence during those lost hours had been profound and undeniable, creating a bond that transcended the professional boundaries that had previously defined their relationship. The implications of this connection had not gone unnoticed by palace officials or the royal family. Commander Harrison had submitted a detailed report recommending Marcus's immediate transfer to duties that would eliminate direct contact with Princess Charlotte. The documents cited multiple protocol violations and suggested that the captain's obvious emotional involvement compromised his ability to provide objective security assessment and protection. Yet Queen Elizabeth, after careful consideration and extensive consultation with Prince William, had reached a different conclusion. The monarch had witnessed countless examples of duty and loyalty during her long reign, but Marcus's dedication during Charlotte's crisis represented something rarer and more valuable, genuine love that enhanced rather than compromised his protective capabilities. The Queen's decision to retain Marcus as Charlotte's primary security detail sent shockwaves through traditional palace hierarchies while establishing precedent that personal feelings could coexist with professional excellence. Marcus had spent the weeks following Charlotte's recovery grappling with the new reality of his position. The walls he had carefully constructed between personal emotions and professional duty had been permanently dismantled, leaving him vulnerable but strangely liberated. His feelings for Charlotte were now known throughout the palace, creating a situation that required constant navigation between appropriate behavior and the undeniable connection that had proven crucial to her recovery. Charlotte, for her part, had emerged from her medical crisis with increased clarity about her own feelings and desires. The experience of being lost in darkness, guided home by Marcus's unwavering presence, had crystallized emotions that she had previously kept carefully suppressed. As a royal princess, she understood the complications that her feelings created, but she also possessed the strength and determination to pursue what her heart deemed worthy of fighting for. The first real test of their changed dynamic came during a state dinner honoring visiting diplomats from several Commonwealth nations. Charlotte, resplendent in a midnight blue gown that complemented her intelligent eyes, moved through the evening's social obligations with her characteristic grace and warmth. Marcus maintained his security position with professional efficiency, but observers noted the subtle ways their awareness of each other had intensified, how his eyes tracked her movements with protective tenderness, how her posture relaxed when he was nearby, how their brief exchanges carried intimate undertones that hadn't existed before her collapse. Prince William, watching these interactions with paternal concern and political awareness, recognized that his daughter's relationship with her bodyguard represented uncharted territory for the modern monarchy. Traditional royal marriages had been arranged for political advantage or social appropriateness, but Charlotte belonged to a generation that valued authentic connection over conventional expectations. The challenge was finding a way to honor her happiness while maintaining institutional stability. The evening's most significant moment came when Charlotte was approached by Lord Pemberton, a distant cousin known for his traditional views on royal protocol and his belief that the monarchy's survival depended on strict adherence to historical precedent. His comments about appropriate relationships for royal family members were clearly intended to remind Charlotte of her obligations to dynasty and duty. "Your Royal Highness," Lord Pemberton intoned with practiced formality, "I trust your recent health concerns have reminded you of the importance of maintaining proper associations. The Crown's reputation depends on carefully considered choices in all aspects of royal life." Charlotte's response surprised everyone within hearing distance. Rather than offering polite deflection or diplomatic acknowledgement, she met Lord Pemberton's implied criticism with direct honesty that reflected her newfound clarity about personal priorities. "Lord Pemberton, my recent experience taught me that life can be unpredictable and precious. When someone risks their career and reputation to ensure your safety and recovery, questions about proper associations become rather insignificant compared to recognizing genuine loyalty and love. Her words carried quiet authority that reminded listeners of her royal heritage while asserting her right to make personal choices based on authentic feelings. The exchange was witnessed by several influential members of London's social elite, ensuring that news of Charlotte's position would spread throughout relevant circles. Some would interpret her comments as a refreshing departure from stuffy royal tradition, while others would express concern about the monarchy's changing values. However, the most important audience, her family, had already begun adapting to the reality that Charlotte's happiness might require redefining traditional expectations. Marcus had overheard enough of the conversation to understand its implications for both their futures. Charlotte was publicly acknowledging feelings that could reshape her role within the royal family while potentially compromising his own position. The knowledge that she was willing to defend their connection, even at personal cost, filled him with profound gratitude while intensifying his determination to prove worthy of such loyalty. 2 days after the state dinner, Queen Elizabeth requested a private meeting with both Charlotte and Marcus, an unprecedented gathering that would determine whether their relationship could continue within the framework of royal duty or would require impossible choices between love and obligation. The meeting took place in the Queen's private study, a room lined with family photographs and mementos from 7 decades of royal service. The atmosphere was formal yet intimate, reflecting the personal nature of the conversation while acknowledging its institutional significance. "Captain Wellington," the Queen began, her voice carrying the measured authority of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected nations and individuals alike. "Your service to this family has been exemplary, and your dedication during Charlotte's crisis exceeded every reasonable expectation. However, your obvious feelings for my granddaughter create complexities that require careful consideration." Marcus stood at attention, prepared to accept whatever decision the monarch reached regarding his future. "Your Majesty, I understand the complications my feelings have created. I'm prepared to accept transfer or resignation if my presence compromises Princess Charlotte's position or the crown's reputation." "That won't be necessary," Charlotte interjected, her voice carrying quiet determination that reminded everyone present of her royal lineage. "Grandmother, Marcus's feelings for me are matched by my own for him. If his position becomes untenable because of our connection, then mine must be considered equally compromised." The Queen studied her granddaughter with the penetrating gaze that had evaluated world leaders and family members alike for decades. She saw in Charlotte's expression the same combination of duty and personal conviction that had guided the monarchy through previous challenges and transitions. "Charlotte, dear, your happiness has always been important to this family. However, your role as a working royal creates obligations that extend beyond personal preferences. The question becomes whether Captain Wellington's presence enhances or compromises your ability to fulfill those obligations." The conversation that followed would be remembered as a turning point in modern royal history. Charlotte articulated her vision for a monarchy that could embrace authentic relationships while maintaining institutional integrity. Marcus spoke about his commitment to protecting both Charlotte and the crown's interests, even if that protection sometimes required navigating uncharted territory. The Queen listened with the wisdom of someone who had guided the monarchy through numerous crises and transitions. The outcome surprised even the most optimistic observers. Rather than demanding separation or resignation, the Queen announced a new approach that would allow their relationship to develop within modified parameters of royal duty. Marcus would continue as Charlotte's primary security detail, but their personal connection would be acknowledged and accommodated rather than hidden or denied. This arrangement represented a significant departure from traditional royal protocol while establishing precedent for future generations. The decision required careful management of public perception and media attention. Palace officials crafted statements that emphasized Marcus's exceptional qualifications and dedicated service while gradually introducing the idea that royal security details might develop deeper connections with their charges. The approach was designed to normalize their relationship while maintaining dignity appropriate to royal standards. 6 months later, Charlotte and Marcus attended their first official engagement as an acknowledged couple, the rescheduled children's charity gala that had been postponed during her medical crisis. Charlotte wore the same powder blue gown she had planned for the original event, while Marcus stood beside her in dress uniform that reflected his continued role as her protector and, now openly acknowledged partner. The event was a remarkable success, raising record amounts for children's charities while demonstrating that the monarchy could embrace change without sacrificing its essential character. Charlotte's happiness was evident to everyone present, radiating the same warmth and compassion that had always defined her public persona, while now enhanced by the security of knowing she could be authentically herself in all aspects of her life. As they danced together during the gala's concluding celebration, Charlotte and Marcus embodied a new vision for royal relationships, one based on genuine connection, mutual respect, and shared commitment to service. Their love story had begun with a crisis that shattered protocol and ended with a transformation that strengthened both their personal bond and their dedication to the crown. The palace corridors that had once echoed with whispered concerns about appropriate boundaries now resonated with recognition that sometimes the most profound protection comes from the willingness to love completely and authentically. Marcus had broken protocol to save Charlotte's life, and, in doing so, had helped create space within the monarchy for relationships based on truth rather than tradition alone. Their story would inspire future generations of royals to believe that duty and love need not be mutually exclusive, and that sometimes the greatest service to crown and country comes from having the courage to follow one's heart while never forgetting the obligations that give life meaning and purpose.